recognized.
Thank you very much. Before I get started with my opening statement, I think what's happening with COVID is now Americans are now seeing what's been happening to our black children for decades by these unions. We get a report in 2017 that 75% of the black boys in the state of California cannot read and write, and nobody says a word. Nobody thinks that's crazy. Nobody thinks that something should be addressing this process where unions are focusing on themselves, their institution, and not those black young men that will go out and become very, very unsuccessful, very hopeless in the future. This has been going on for quite a while, my friends. So the upside of COVID is there, if there is one, is that parents across the country now have empathy for those who've been used, abused, and discarded for so many decades. So I'm very happy that we're now having this conversation, and we're going to, find out what the cause is. We need to find out what the cause is. We never go this route ever again to give this kind of power to people who do not care about our kids, care about the billions of dollars we're going to get, the power they get, the ability to shut things down. And right now, yes, we will be losing a lot of kids with 40%, and I wish I was trying to find that study. 40% of black kids in many of these blue states and cities will never go back to school again. So no, we're not going to ever get them back, and we need to recognize that. Okay, learning loss results from school closures during the COVID-19 pandemic have taken a historic toll on our students and their education. This loss of learning is highlighted by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which shows the history scores of 8th graders have fallen below a level that they were in 1994. That's a 30-year low. Civics tests for 8th graders have fallen for the same level as 1998. The results from National Center of Educational Statistics, which administer the NAEP long-term reading and mathematics assessment for 13-year-old students, are particularly concerning. Students' math scores have regressed by 33 years, and reading scores have dropped to 50-year lows. If you cannot read, you cannot learn, you cannot ever hope. Ignorant and free can never be. Nearly a half a century of steady incremental reading gains have been wiped out in 2 years by self-centered union nonsense. For many young people of this generation, they're projected to lose earning $44,000 less over their lifetime due to these the demanded closures. And not to mention the impact of mental health, suicide, depression caused by 2 years of isolation. Here are some of the union demands, the ransom note that alter the lives and futures of millions of children in our country. Medicaid, now this has nothing to do with school. Medicaid for all, banning charter schools, banning standardized tests, paying teachers' mortgages and rent, increased property taxes on businesses, financial support for illegal aliens. Now what does that have to do with teaching our kids anything? And of course, the union in LA was demanding $250 million for their union. The concession by our Democratic colleagues across the aisle over this time was $190 billion in taxpayer funds, which is 3 times more of the funds spent in 1 year. Much of this is unaccounted for, wasted, unused, and going into union coffers. We need to find and implement solutions that help our students bridge the learning gap and excel in their academic and career aspiration. Moving forward, we must ensure that our children can never ever be used as ransom. Our children are our future, not our bargaining chips or political hostages. That's why I introduced a bill that ensures a bright future of the most vulnerable children, our Title IX kids, will never be threatened again by adults negotiating for more pay. Our poor children should never be used, abused, and discarded again in this manner. The legislation that I presented called Kids in the Class Act allows for Title I funding to follow the child once a school closes to another, if another pandemic or union strikes. These funds can be used by the parents to seek support outside the closed schools, educational support services like tutoring, educational classes outside the home, private school tuition, and educational therapies for students with disabilities. This should be something that we all agree on, if in case the child is our priority. Dr. Marcus, one of the things that concern me about the learning loss is that high poverty minority students seem to be particularly left behind. Can you talk more about the data that looks like, what the data looks like for high poverty and minority students, and why these children seem to be especially hard hit?
There's three factors to pay attention to on this question. The first is there was a downturn in student achievement that preceded the pandemic. Around 2013, we started to see a slight downturn. The second thing is closures were disproportionately difficult for poor and minority and low achieving students. For each week they were closed, and those closures lasted longer for those students. So holding all things constant, they got a 1-2 punch during the pandemic, and they'll be paying for it for some time.
Thank you, Dr. Marcus, and
Thank
thank
you.
you,
No, you're back. Thank you so much.
Representative Owens.